with Russian leader Vladimir Putin.
This coming amid growing concerns about what Biden will say, what he will do in that face-off with whether Russia will come out of it feeling more emboldened than ever.
For more on what we can expect from the meeting between the two leaders, let's bring in our Newsmax White House correspondent, Emerald Robinson, standing by at the White House. Emerald, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Emma. It'll also be interesting to see if Democrats in the media call for the transcripts of that meeting like they did the Trump-Putin summit from Helsinki. Talking about it, President Biden is now on his way, currently en route to the Brussels airport to fly to Geneva, Switzerland for that meeting. Earlier today, he had a meeting with the King of Belgium. He also held a European Union U.S. summit, which he just left. But clearly, the focus is now on that highly anticipated meeting between he and the Russian president, the first face-to-face sit-down the two will have, as both leaders of their country. Vice President Biden has met with Putin before in his capacity as vice president. Now, Biden has had a lot to say about Putin. He talked a big game about the Russian president during the campaign and criticized his predecessor for what he says was being soft on Vladimir Putin. But yesterday, during a press conference following the NATO summit that was 2.5 hours late, and Biden read from a teleprompter, he also only took 5 questions. One of those 5 questions was actually, does he still believe that President Putin, Vladimir Putin, is a killer? But Biden having a little trouble answering that question.
In a weekend interview, Vladimir Putin laughed at the suggestion that you had called him a killer. Is that still your belief, sir, that he is a killer?
Well, look, I mean, he has made clear that the answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he.
So Biden, they're struggling to find the words. There is a lot of questions about how he had such a hard time answering that question. And look, Emma, that's a long way from where the former vice president, now president, said that during a meeting once he looked into Putin's eyes and told him he had no soul.
Yeah, very interesting moment. Of course, we're also anticipating a solo press conference post that meeting with Vladimir Putin. Yeah. So we'll see who the president calls on in that situation there, the reporters in the room. Also want to ask you about this, Emerald. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson addressing some of the criticism that European leaders have faced regarding China. What did he say?
Yeah. Look, the Group of Seven did put some rhetoric towards China in their communique. At the end of their summit, it got criticized for saying there was no direct commitments to hold China accountable for their human rights abuses. So yesterday, or recently, UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson tried to answer to that, but he continued to hedge a bit when it comes to China.
I don't think anybody around the table today wants to descend into a new Cold War with China. I don't think that's where people are, but I think people see, they see challenges. They see things that we have to manage together, but they also see opportunities. And I think that what we need to do is do it together.
I've been talking to lawmakers here and their staffers on the Hill about what they're seeing out of the summits regarding China, the language, possible actions, and they are very concerned. They're concerned that the world leaders just don't take China seriously enough, and they say even our leaders here in Washington, D.C. That is one of the major concerns I hear about when I talk to lawmakers. Emma.
Right. Yeah, and you're talking to those sources every single day. Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson. Emerald, thank you.
All right, for reaction now, we'll bring in Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. There's a lot I want to talk to you about. You've been making headlines with that surveillance video there at your house. I'm going to ask you a little bit about that and have you weigh in. But before I get to that, we played some of the sound from President Biden giving his briefing. He was asked the question about his upcoming meeting with Vladimir Putin. There was a 25-second delay when asked, do you still think Putin is a killer? That wasn't edited in any way. This was the president of the United States not knowing how to weigh in on Vladimir Putin. What are you expecting to come out of this meeting between these two world leaders?
Well, I don't know, but I am very much saddened that it's becoming more and more apparent that Joe Biden is slowly but surely losing his mental acumen that is necessary for the job. Hopefully he'll be up to the task when he meets with Vladimir Putin, because the stakes are so high. By way of example, Russia just got through attacking the United States of America's energy supplies with Colonial Pipeline, attacking our food supply, and Joe Biden needs to make sure that that issue is brought to the forefront and that this kind of criminal activity by a foreign nation is stopped dead in its tracks.
There was also comments that the president made in regards to your party, sir, a Republican Party, is a dying party, outlining that Trump supporters are the minority party. He weighed in on the Trump support, also describing it as phony. Listen to this. I'll get your reaction.
The leaders I'm dealing with in NATO and the G7 are leaders who know our recent history, know generically the character of the American people, and know where the vast center of the public stands. I think they, like I do, believe the American people are not going to sustain that kind of behavior. I think it is a shock and surprise that what's happened in terms of the consequence of President Trump's phony populism.
Your response to that?
Well, it's quite clear that the leaders of these other countries put their own countries first. I don't understand Joe Biden's hesitancy in also agreeing with President Trump that we need to make America number one in the world, as a status that we've held now for about 75 years. So America should be first in the minds of our policymakers and the minds of our negotiators when we go overseas and deal with both friends and adversaries on the world stage.
Domestic politics making its way across the pond. Do you care to weigh in on that?
Well, when you talk about domestic politics, I didn't hear any particular public policy issues domestically that were brought to the forefront. I do think it's inappropriate.
Let me just jump in really quick, if I may. The comment I'm making here is the fact that he said that the Republican Party is dying and that the folks that voted for Trump are the minority. In bringing that to the world stage, is that appropriate? And do you agree, is the Republican Party dying?
It is inappropriate for the President of the United States to go overseas and make those kind of attacks against another political party. But let's be real clear. I'm sure Joe Biden wishes that we're dead, but you're going to see us rising to the surface come 2022 because we're going to beat their socks off in the House of Representatives. And most likely, we're also going to take the Senate to boot. So this may be wishful thinking on the part of Joe Biden and his handlers, but it ain't going to be true come 2022.
All right. Strong words from the congressman there. Before you go, I've got to ask you about this. What happened at your house here? I know you released this.
Opportunities there. But for whatever reason, they want to mischaracterize things. And then since what happened that you just saw in that video, I've been served another 2 or 3 times. I can't even keep track of them all. Nonetheless, what happened on that day, it is a criminal offense. It carries up to a year in jail and $6,000 fine. And my wife, Martha, is going to be soon obtaining an arrest warrant that's been approved by our district attorney's office, by the Huntsville Police Department, and also, I believe, soon by warrant magistrate.
As we have there, the full screen of that law there. Congressman, thank you so much for weighing in on that. We do appreciate that. I hope we'll see you again. That is Congressman Mo Brooks. Thank you.
Treated students differently at prom earlier this month. The superintendent of the school said some students who were not able to show proof of vaccination were marked with a black Sharpie, while vaccinated students were labeled with a red marker. The Exeter School District told NBC Boston the markings were done for the purpose of contact tracing, which allowed all kids to attend the prom regardless of their vaccination status. Republican New Hampshire State Rep Melissa Litchfield received a lot of complaints from parents in the district, and she joins us now, live on National Report. Good to see you. Thank you for coming on today. We appreciate you taking the time. As we know, just following the timeline, catching our viewers up here, prom was almost 2 weeks ago. The school district says when students signed up for prom, they were told about this contact tracing system. You say that's not the case. What have you heard from parents?
So initially, parents reached out to me the morning after the prom, and they were outraged because when their children showed up to the prom, if they did not show their papers to show that they were vaccinated, they were labeled with a number, not just a mark, but they were assigned a number in black Sharpie on their body, okay? And then as the children went through the evening and they were dancing, approximately every third song, these children were asked to raise their hands to show their number as underclassmen went around and they recorded their numbers.
Wow.
The parents are outraged, number one, because you don't create different classes based on whether or not you're vaccinated. What's next? You know, did you have an STD? And we're going to number you so the world knows that because we're going to track that. Parents were also concerned simply because they had no idea that this was going to happen. There had been a board meeting just a couple weeks, maybe 3 weeks prior to the prom, where it was brought up that parents were upset because teachers in the middle and high school were saying to students, have you been vaccinated as yet? And they were asking the students if they'd been vaccinated and when they were going to get vaccinated. Parents were outraged by this. This was brought up at a school board meeting, and parents were told that it is not acceptable for anyone to ask their children whether or not they are vaccinated. This hit the local newspaper, Seacoast Online, in May, stating that the superintendent said, look, no staff member is going to question a child. Yet, right after that, there's an Instagram post from the 2021 prom Instagram that states, if you've been vaccinated, you must, not could you, would you, should you, but you must show the front and back of your card, and it is to be sent to, and it was this advisor that was doing the prom, also along with the school nurse, okay? Much of the correspondence that went to the students or information about the prom did not go to the parents. It went directly to the students. Now, some may be 18, but this is a senior prom. There's 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, 16, 15. These are minors. And yes, it was put on a Google Doc that there would be contact tracing, but in no way were parents alerted that their children were going to be branded and marked with a number and a Sharpie.
Now, of course, the age that you list would be above 12 years old, in which children could be eligible for vaccination. And have you heard from students as to why they've either decided not to be vaccinated? Have they had the chance to be vaccinated at this point? Did they feel singled out because they weren't vaccinated?
They did. And, you know, there's a broad array of reasons why people have not been vaccinated as yet. At this point in time, it's hit the media that there are some concerns about how the vaccine may have impacted certain demographics within their age group. I believe the CDC is meeting, is it this Thursday, to actually discuss this. Some students have underlying health issues where actually it's not safe for them to go ahead and get this vaccination. And you know what? When they go to check in at prom, are they to explain, look, this is my medical history that's very private, and they're going to put it out there in the wide open? Many of these parents and students, they're nervous about the vaccine. It's just come out. It's just been approved for their age group. And the bottom line is they want time to think about it. Yeah. They felt pressure that they had to get this vaccination done prior to the prom. Yeah. What's the rush? Why can't these kids have time to think about it?
Yes, no, absolutely. Running out of time for the segment, but I just want to ask you briefly, since it was about 2 weeks ago, have there been any positive COVID cases linked back to this prom?
As far as I know, I have not heard of any COVID cases. I want to say very quickly, the prom was a week ago Friday. And one of the concerns and one of the reasons why the kiddos felt so much pressure, the prom was a week ago Friday. The graduation was this past Saturday. So anyone that had been tested positive, if you were anywhere near them on the dance floor, you had it held over your head that you would not be able to attend your graduation.
Wow. All right, State Rep Melissa Litchfield joining us live with that story out of New Hampshire. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you taking that next plan. Yeah. But definitely going rogue and something you would not expect in a local market.
I'm sorry, I'm looking up because I want to see if the station let her go or if she's on administrative leave or if there's any disciplinary action. Obviously, you know, when you go against your own network or your own station on their own air, obviously you have a responsibility. It's frowned upon. She's taken a stand, and a lot of people are giving her hats off to that. Though I want to put in context, that Project Veritas video is supposed to drop today. We don't know what's on it. No one knows what's on it just yet. There's no context for this. All you know is, like you said, there's a tease for it. But it does, I will say this, it does outline the distrust in media that exists right now. It's pointed out in so many different various polls. So this triggered a lot of folks on social media to be like, oh, what is she talking about? What is this network silencing her? There's this whole cancel culture, censorship. It brings all these questions to light. And when you see a reporter in a major market, by the way, in our country, like Houston, pushing back on her own station and not being afraid to do it, you wonder if she does have something big to report. But either way, we don't know what it is yet, but I know a lot of people are waiting on it.
All right. How's that for a tease? We'll wait and see if anything comes from that.
From President Biden during the G7 and NATO summits. Biden says he's satisfied with G7 demands regarding China's human rights abuses and economic rule breaking.
The president's next big agenda item is a meeting with Russia's Vladimir Putin tomorrow in Geneva. Here's Biden yesterday from the NATO summit in Brussels talking tough about Russia as well. Watch.
I'm going to make clear to President Putin that there are areas where we can cooperate if he chooses. And if he chooses not to cooperate and acts in a way that he has in the past relative to cybersecurity and some other activities, then we will respond.
Biden also saying he hopes Putin will behave in a manner consistent with, quote, appropriate behavior for a head of state.
We'll bring our panelists in now. Today we have Joe Collins, U.S. Navy veteran and former GOP congressional candidate from California. Kelly Hyman's joining us. She's a Democratic strategist and an attorney. And Rich Valdez is the host of the podcast This is America and former Trump National Diversity Advisor. Good to see everybody here. And Rich, and I'll start with you. What can we expect from this Biden-Putin meeting, in your opinion?
Well, to me, it looks like Biden's losing it. He's been punked by Putin. I think that's one blunder right after the next. He's showing, I'm going to say, a pretty high level of weakness, and I think it's not good for America. And listen, I'm rooting for Biden because he's our guy. Like it or not, he's our president. So my hope is that he can show a little bit more strength to kind of put Putin on notice and say, hey, look, maybe even borrow a page from Trump's playbook and kind of build Biden himself back better.
Yeah, we want to play the moment from the press conference yesterday. It started again about 2.5 hours late. But the president was asked about his meeting with Putin. Here's what he said.
I'm hoping that that President Putin concludes that there is some interest in terms of his own interest in changing the perception that the world has of him in terms of whether or not he will engage in behavior that's more consistent with what is considered to be appropriate behavior for head of state.
Kelly Hyman, what are your expectations for the meeting between the two leaders?
My expectation for the meeting between the two world leaders is to have a discussion about stuff that affects not only the U.S. and Russia, but also affects the world at large. We have to remember that we are one world, and I would disagree with the other panelists. I think Biden has a lot of experience with foreign policy over his 30 years in government, and I do believe that he understands Putin, has met with Putin before as vice president, and knows that he is a worthy opponent.
Rich Valdez, do you care to respond?
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly what we're looking at. We're looking at Biden's 47 years in Washington, 36 in the Senate. These are 36 marked years of failure. If we look at things that happened, when did Crimea get annexed? It was under Biden's watch, under Obama. So I would hardly look to that as a straw or a feather in his cap for victory. Biden needs to step his game back. And like I said, he needs to build himself back better.
Let me ask Joe Collins this really quick to move on to this part, because one opinion writer calls the meeting between Biden and Putin perilous, recalling the disastrous meeting, as it's been written 60 years ago, between President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, saying, quote, Khrushchev came away with an increased conviction that Kennedy was fundamentally weak and indecisive. It would be naive to conclude that Biden's far shorter meeting with Putin on Wednesday, even following the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact military alliance, is without similar perils. If Khrushchev found Kennedy weak and indecisive, how will Putin find Biden? Joe?
Well, I'll tell you this. Look, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again. And you talk about Joe Biden, a guy who is sitting as a president of the United States, who has been in office for well over 47 years right now. And you got to think, he hasn't intimidated Russia. President Obama has never intimidated Russia while he was the vice president. And all they can do is tough talk. I mean, Joe Biden spent a number of months talking about Russia when it comes to election interference, to tapping into our power grid, and has not produced anything yet. And so now you have an opportunity to sit face to face with a person who you've been accusing for a very long time of doing all these mischievous things. Now it's time for the American public and the entire world to see how you react in person. We saw how he did throughout the debates with President Trump. Come on, shut up, man. It's going to be the same thing when he meets with Vladimir Putin, unfortunately.
Well, we know after the meeting, again, he will be having a solo press conference. Sometimes you would see the two world leaders holding the joint briefing together after the meeting. That's not going to be the case in this situation here, and we'll wait and see what reporters ask the president about what happened. We'll also wait and see from you guys. Joe Collins, Kelly Hyman, Rich Valdez, stick around. We want to talk to you about another topic.
Yeah, more on Biden's European tour. It wasn't all about global issues. President Biden also had a lot to say about President Trump